way of okay, is that better? Okay. So it's going to be a mix of poetry by way of talking about how I work and where the work comes from. So the title of my talk is Black Comp and Atomic Worlding on the Poetics of Scale, Ecology, and Perception. And as an introduction, I want to take you through a couple of theories that I've been working on, and then I'll get into the work. Okay. Practice. I needed an infrastructure based on liberation logics. I needed forming to be a priority over form. I'm here to share how museums function as containers for poetic forming at the register of freedom and invention. Practice theory, practice theory. I am presenting today as a foundation of my work what I have titled Black Compositional Thought. Black comp is a working theory towards invention. Black comp is a close read of movements as unmeasurable and indeterminable. Black comp is something towards freedom. It is helpful to use here Ronaldo Walcott's exploration of freedom because it is my threshold towards improvisation. Ronaldo writes, freedom resists guarantees of comportment. I define freedom as ways of being human in the world that exists beyond the realms of the judicial and that allows for bodily sovereignty. I argue that freedom marks an individual and a collective desire to be in common and be indifferent in a world that is non-hierarchical and non-violent. And it marks as well a social, political, and imaginative condition that marks possibilities that make possible multiple ways of being in the world. So I'm interested in the multiple. I'm interested in radical indeterminacy, and I'm interested in abstraction. I will say that the paintings are very dark, so I'm sorry that I hope it's legible, but I tend to work in these sort of dark palette tones. Okay. Black comp, Black compositional thought, radical indeterminacy, museum as a lab. In painting, I've learned to see with liquidity, the drenching, the marking, the splattering, the flooding of canvases have shaped my gaze. My lens is viscous. The deluge is my ground. Each surface a dim clearing, an atmosphere for engagement with Black state change and radical indeterminacy. In the field of the canvas, I work between perception and imagination, envisioning Black spatial liberation strategies, sometimes nebulous, sometimes lightning. Other times, the spaces are so distant, only drawing will bring them closer to me. But what I always know is that studying critical navigations by the enslaved and the dehumanized opens up possibilities for more livable futures in the ongoing enclosures of dispossession. I call this critical wayfinding Black compositional thought, or Black comp. Black comp considers how thresholds, paths, architectures, objects, and geographies are composed by Black movement, and from these encounters, how properties of energy, scale, sound interact as networks of liberation. Looking and creating space from these relational encounters, both at a quotidian and a phenomenological register, keeps me in a creative force of ancestorship while forming from the expanse of the present. Discursive and transhistorical, Black comp also feels like an urgent exploration of the physical world that forced Blackness. I call this the shapes that make the Black. Here, new critical geometries emerge along with a compositional strategy that opens up existential possibilities. These geometries speak to questions of embodiment, time, light, space, and also prompt principles of motion, distance, to comprehend the expanse of Black geography. On sculpture. This piece has, the title is, oftentimes in my practice, I write my way towards the work, and oftentimes I write my way away from the work. So with this piece, I had written a poem because I was struggling with the site. And I'll share this poem with you that sort of resolved the formation of these geometries. Okay. Liquid shadows, solid dreams. I am a hinge enclosed in a shadow enclosed in a memory of motion in the round. I am a sculpture finding my way through the sky. There is a door in a cloud where geometries tumble down in blue rain, each shape a meadow. The liquid of the dream, a curvilinear beginning, drenched, living new refractions and forms. I am drawing my way to an enclosed shape, a shape enclosed in the clearing, a clearing in gaping violence. The shapes of catastrophe break among the trees. I am a drawing enclosed in the howling night, finding my way to tenderness, my body terrestrial. The distance marks my palm, and blue is the color of memory. My body scalar, the motion secured. I'll share the piece with you now. I'll take a second and share a short documentary that was done around the piece that talks about the way in which the piece is situated in New York City. Movement is best understood by thinking ironically about the present. The idea of the piece is really to bring myself into a deep condition of presence and here-ness so that I can expand and make space for the trans-historical condition of all histories of peoples who insist on self-liberation. I'm acutely aware that the work comes from liberatory practices, the shifting and changing of architecture and infrastructures, the sharing of languages and movement and how language moves and marks are made as people move. I hope that people respond to the works based on their own conditions of improvisation, interiority, play, mindfulness, and can feel something and can feel welcome and feel like this work is built to triumph or regard both stillness and play as valuable conditions of lived experiences. And I cite this work on the terrace, looking at beautiful landscapes and looking at beautiful skies and also experiencing heavy rains, loud noises and sounds that have to do with cars and trains and trucks. I was interested in putting the sculpture in a place of witnessing all of those conditions at all of these registers. The sunrise, the sunset, the movement of time, the movement of space and sound, and the thinking and considerations of others and otherwises and other conditions, other ways of living. being near the river and being in deep prayer oftentimes around this work and making this work beyond myself and then finding myself growing into the work. I have a lot to do with ambitions around freedom. The conjuring and making and practice of sculpture, architectural space, and painting has to do with the level of improvisation that is geared toward a freedom of self that is against the colonial project in the first place. This is the most ambitious work I've ever created. It is a piece that continues to surprise me. It continues to push back at me, and it's a productive disruption in my practice as well. When you take a risk like this, it's almost like syncopation. It like sort of blows back at you and you have to come back. Okay, sorry about that. So the ways in which I think and work site specifically in museum spaces in particular is around how do I exhaust the possibility of form. In making this work on the terrace was an opportunity for me to exhaust the possibilities of Black comp. What does it mean to establish an infrastructure for abstraction and then push it to its edge and create a space where the commons can happen, where people can gather and then self-create and reinvent in real time and use the museum both as a playground and as a space for meditation. Okay, so there's another way that I'd like to talk about the museum outside of a lab. And here I go. So in this space of this lab, painting happens, improvisation happens. And what I wanted from this piece is to break down these sort of boundaries between painting, drawing, architecture, and sculpture. So in some moments it feels like architecture, then in another it transforms into painting, and in another it transforms into a drawing experience. And as the viewer walks around and navigates the work, I think that the viewer embodies a sense of indeterminacy. And in that indeterminacy, new possibilities for movement and in interacting in all sorts of built environments, I believe, emerge. So what happens inside these spaces as time, space fluctuates, what also occurs is for me a kind of sensoria that it's all, it almost feels impossible. So when I work with fabricators who produce these kinds of ideas that I draw on paper, when I'm standing in it, it almost feels like an impossible distance. Okay. 2, museums as studio. Okay. In 2016, I began working with what I now call hypershapes. Hypershapes were a response to Black comp. You'll see through my practice that I've established these building blocks to expand the practice and invent new form. So after thinking and working with Black comp, I then needed tools to work out that spatial logic. And from those tools arrived the hypershapes. They started as a series of drawings in response to spatial strategies of the enslaved people who hid and stowed away in architecture for freedom. Anthony Burns, The Hull of a Ship. Henry Box Brown, A Square Box. Harriet Jacobs, A Triangle. With Black geography in mind, I worked my way to a multi-scalar approach to thinking about magnitude instead of direction when contemplating fugitivity. I needed another set of strategies to think on nomadicity, quiet, movement, perception. So these collective spatial intelligence of fugitivity and beyond fugitivity provided me a foundation to explore the question of magnitude instead of direction. Hypershapes are complex, expansive, and porous. Hypershapes are complex, expansive, and porous. It's a living equation in my hands. I use them not for the purpose in which they came into existence, was to dispossess, dehumanize, enslave, re-enslave by moving the enslaved body to multiple conditions of architectural spaces. These were developed for improvisation. And when I am working in this way, I am constantly toiling with these histories and these forms in real time. In that toiling, I lose my mind. I find my mind. I take my mind apart and start again. Here, forming begins, a continuous state of indeterminacy. What these hypershapes have become in my drawings and collages and paintings, I use them to construct these two-dimensional forms that an edge turn into a three-dimensional space. This is, I'm sorry, let me go back and just say something, a little bit about material. So this is a collage of paper, graphite, charcoal, metal. I lay down paper, I cover it with a liquid graphite, that graphite dries, and then I continuously on it, line that curve, line that rectilinear triangle, and line that shape of the box. So inside of it, what propels the work are these histories of slave narratives, but what drives the work and continues the work is a meditation towards their freedom. I'm uninterested in re-representing the box, the square, or the triangle, and I'm uninterested in sharing with audiences what I think. When I think or conceive of something, it's not my responsibility to then represent that thing. My responsibility is to share the energy and forces that flow through me as an artist. I'll share this work. Oh, I'm sorry. So when working and discovering the hypershapes and sort of digging them into my practice, I moved from gouache. This is a drawing. It's about 3 feet by 4 feet, gouache on paper. And so what happens when I'm making and in the studio, I often think about the diagrammatic line versus the expressive line. And I often think about what does it mean to think in the realm of geometric abstraction in relationship to abstract expressionistic practice. Neither one of these forms are innocent. I take them and collapse them onto each other, whether structural space, experience, and body experience moments in real-time embodied space in relationship to emotion and mood and movement. So oftentimes in my work, you'll see this collapse between what is a hard edge geometric moment and what is an expressionistic mark. So collectively, the hypershapes were a self, when I thought about this or figured out that the hypershapes could be used in my practice, I gave myself an assignment. So oftentimes, as you see, I'll self-assign to push my practice forward. So what ended up happening is myself these drawing assignments. I had two minutes to get a mark down, to get a line down. And what happened was I then placed this sort of self-assignment up against music, right? So I'd play a song for a minute, and then the drawing had to be done in that minute. So you still see the curve, you still see the rectilinear triangle, and you still see the 90 degrees marks quite frequently through the practices. So this is 205 hypershaped drawings that came out of course, that kind of condition of Black compositional thought, to the hypershapes, to now a sort of idiosyncratic language that I use across my practice. So I made this work in 2016, and it was a true pivot in my practice where I can use the hypershape to talk about any number of subjects, but it is the foundation of all of my geometries. All right. So this work was a piece that I had done 2000, I'm sorry, I'm losing my years now. I think it was I want to say it was during COVID. So it's 2021, I believe. And I was in Seoul and used the museum as another space to exercise hypershapes. So as I am working in between institutions, in between exhibitions, I go back to practice, right? So I don't make these things and cannot fit these things in my studio. So it's absolutely imperative that I have a museum or large institutional space kind of work out the scales around how hypershapes are developed. So museums are the space where I try, I work, I tone, I tune, and I risk. I'll show you the piece. Oh, sorry. So what has happened over time with the hypershapes is that they've come out of drawing into a sort of physicality that goes onto the wall. So I start mapping and shaping in this kind of fictional space of where I went to school was at I went to school at Tougaloo College in Tougaloo, Mississippi, right? So Tougaloo College in Tougaloo, Mississippi used to be a plantation for the enslaved. So what hypershapes allows me to do is think about the history of these geographies and not, again, reproduce a map, but reproduce a sort of footprint in the way, in the intensity and the density of how these geographies impact me and my body at the time, and how they have contributed to Black compositional thought. I was thinking about it then, but I was thinking about it maybe in my 30s, but through the practice, I've become very aware that I need to name things, and especially these large shifts that happen in my practice. And I name them so I can grow them and tend to them with ethics and principles that propel me into more, and I think, more confident improvisational working practices. Okay. A third way where I use museums outside of, again, as a lab, I use them to think about acrobatics. And what do I mean by acrobatics? I mean performance, I mean movement, I mean providing a space inside a space. So oftentimes, when I'm dealing with these histories, I'm often wondering, how can I invite collaboration? How can I create a space, again, inside of a space? This piece is entitled Nautical Dusk. I did do this in 2019, and I was working with an archive that really sort of troubled me. And this archive in particular was about a gentleman who worked on a college campus. This gentleman had worked on this college campus for about 35 years and then passed away. Inside the archive, they were discussing this gentleman. I'm sorry, I should have written his name down. Samuel James was his name. So Samuel lived on this campus for 30 years. And upon his death, he was treated as if he hadn't worked there at all. And in the archive, they named him, they talked about him as being like dusk, the color of dusk. Well, I thought about Samuel and his grandfather, his father, who survived the transatlantic slave trade, and back to that idea of what does it mean to be in the hull of a ship? What was his father going through as he survived the Middle Passage? So I thought about nautical dusk as a time and space condition, not as a description or something towards identity. So I'd like to think about these histories as something that breaks open and asks questions, not around conditions of identity directly, but how perception works, how time works in the language, the spatial language of the dispossessed. So, and in these spaces, I'm going to go back. Sorry, I'm going a little bit too fast. Nautical dusk, I'll show you the work. So of course here, refraction is very, very important. Time lapse is very important. What is the spatial language moving things across space? And how do objects absorb and be in conversation with each other? The walls of the gallery, this is Colby College. And how do I create space to be inhabited and for conditions of what I call the acrobatics of performance? So oftentimes, when I'm thinking about strategies of making a space in a space for performance, I'm thinking about gravity and push and pull and how people then will respond to this sort of shape language that I'm dealing with. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Oh, I'll just continue. Okay. Another piece at the Soul Biennial. This is constructed out of plywood. Okay. All right, so there's a piece that another poetry wrote that I wrote that I'm going to share with you now. Okay. I prefer poetry as a form of expression. It's I think it's a bit more generous than I have been in the past. And when I share these pieces with friends of mine and collaborators, they seem to open up the work a bit. So I hope in these translations, you hear my gentility and my tenderness that I offer here. Of impossible distance. Calling on the madness between form and shape is my own fault. Pulling on drawing to fire form. Light, the heat is blasting. Yes, dimensions, dimensioning, forming structures that listen. Reverence for this and the cantilevered foot at the door of no return. Reconfiguration, composing my fidelity to ghost. I can't tell you what it is. I'm only dimensioning. Dimensioning at the sense of memory. Intruders choreograph. Sculpture is made at the edge. Open structure, sensoria, when breaking becomes a whole. Okay. A notion. I'll finish around painting. All right. When I am making a work in painting, it's very different when I'm pouring the hypershapes into a painting than when I'm structuring them in a three-dimensional space, right? So painting is for me a meditation that is almost without words. So I'm going to talk about this as sprawling lumens. Painting. I am a painting burrowing through space, collecting dreams for the expanse, crossing boundaries like dangerous beauty. Gravity is a dance, vaulting into intimate darkness, feeling the silence of reconstruction and the fading echoes of steel, blacker than ever everywhere, unilluminated in full resolution, painting a question. So I'm going to share with you a series of paintings. These are all 6 feet by 6 feet by 5 feet, and I'll show you the work. This is acrylic on canvas. So this specific series, I apologize for not having an image of it, but the way they work in the museum space is I line all of these next to each other. So it's not one work after another work after another work. I'm able to use these institutional spaces to really think about painting as an environment and in relation to the architecture of the space. So I'll just go through them, if you can imagine them up against each other. I'm sorry, it's so much information. Um, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's good. All right. Painting a question. So this piece was made, it's 24 feet by 8 feet, was made for the Shanghai Biennial. And this is the question around painting. Painting a question. What does it mean to work in liminal space? Loading the brush, press and mark, dipping blue in gaping space, unkeeping architectures line by line, folding lines into shadows, discover unknown corners of cadmium yellow, the eyes of the hands, the taste of the wind, quiet, no trace. We fight for errantry, mindfully errant. I can still feel the brush in my hand, a spatial phenomenon. When I think about working and sprawling the hypershapes in different conditions where I've not been before, and I had not gone to Shanghai and I had not been there. So it was very careful. I was very careful to think about the hypershapes as this sort of insulated condition, as to not perform some otherness that I had no relation to. So oftentimes in these museum spaces, with working with the right curator, they allow you to create this world. And I'm interested in that. I'm interested when I'm a visitor in different geographies, creating a world as invitation, as something beyond the idea of where I am, my particular geographic history. But I'm interested in the oceans and rivers that we share, the mountains that we know that are so familiar, and the catastrophe of the climate change that we're all trying to push against. So thinking about museum spaces to build these environments and bring these conversations and work these theories to share them with people from across the world that say, okay, where do we connect in the idea of resistance and refusal? And oftentimes we refuse a certain level of representation by way of including invention and new forms that speak to these catastrophes beyond an individual or a sort of soloistic condition of being. I'll share the installation. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'll close with the last one that I wrote for this particular show, thinking about ancestorship and the way in which I've come to Black compositional thought, hypershapes, and questions of scale. The piece is titled Light. Who are you after swallowing the ocean and all of its light? An enclosure of slow violence, a chamber of waves and blue clouds. You swallowed the triangle, the distance, and the unknown. The howling light years are in your body now. Echoes of sorrow and steel adhere to each blood vessel, an intermolecular force of blue. Your arms a blur of ships. You try holding emancipation close to your chest. No time for drowning, you live on. With the dampness of ocean, with dripping spacious hands and brutal horizons, soaked in discontinuous blackness. But now you can spit light. This is where your glory is, the ongoing. The deep swallow changed you, your old self attired in your new self, breathing in new liquid belongings. Now you can lift your finger to see the cumulus energy of Black being. You take a finger, you make a mark, a dig, a scratch. You draw hauntology, a multiscalar condition of an incompressible fluid. This new self, a chance, this new self, all chance and heat, chance as form, an uncertain, indeterminable being of blue, a new demography, a new watercolor. I'll end with the last piece I showed and the Kemper Museum, and it's a stop animation. And what I had done also during COVID was thinking about mark making, drawing, continued questions of liquidity, and thinking about the ways in which the museum can sort of host this improvisational, I'll just call it an animation because I lack a language. This has sound. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. Muchas gracias. I did learn many imperial languages, including Arabic, French, English, Italian, etc., but not yet Spanish. So sorry about this. I will switch to English. So thank you very, very much for having me here. Thank you also to all the people who have been working behind the scenes and also in the front. Thank you, yes. Yeah, so for the time, I just have my phone here so I can just respect the time. I'm really delighted to speak or be in conversation with you. I would like to try to think of how to expose. Maybe I can just move this a little bit because I'm, as you can see, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's fine. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah. I would like to try to think together with you the notion of exposing. I will focus on one aspect of the latest work that they have been doing called colonial toxicity. And maybe I can just comment on this notion of the museum and on the premise somehow of this invitation to think how to somehow question the mission of the museum And I will show you in a minute that the museum has been somehow existing in a very colonial world, and I think it will continue to exist the way it is existing, unfortunately, and you will see why. I think the temporality of coloniality is really with us. It's living even in our bodies, and we will see in a minute why. But I'm very much interested in the notion of habitat. I think the habitat is what we should think about and we should advocate for, and there are many habitats, many people inhabit different sites and histories and stories in different ways. So that's really something I'm, let's say, keen to think about. Also the notion of disrupting, I think that's what somehow some of the work I'm doing disrupts conventions and protocols, and that's what I will show you. So before we start, I think it's really important because we have been traveling to so many places around the world, and we have been really taking some trips, and some were realistic, ones were very fictional. And I think it's I'm really honored to land somewhere together with you, and we will land with The Witness by Aisha at the very end. But I think it's really important to zoom out a little bit and to try to understand that we are, yes, here in 2024, but we are somehow part, and all of us, I mean, nobody's out of this very, very long process where borders were created, where, as you can see here, most, maybe not most, but most of Western countries, I mean, the US is not mentioned directly here, and this is not really a super precise map. It's a Creative Commons, so anyone can use it, and I'm using it on purpose to really think of this scale and the temporality. So we talk about space, but we should also talk about temporality, about times of coloniality and colonialism and colonization. So it's very hard for me to talk about decolonization. I think it's easier for me to talk about colonialism. That's the world I live in. It's a colonial world, still a very colonial world, and I want to study that colonial world. And I'm really coming here, or trying to think together with Frantz Fanon. He was mentioned at the beginning, 2 days ago, when he says that colonial, to be very precise, and I read it in French, I'm trying to translate it for you. He says that decolonization is a very violent process, is the replacement of, he says in French, espèce. We can translate it into species, a replacement of a species by another species. I don't think it will happen in the very near future. We can see that we have not been even able to stop a genocide that is being screened in front of our eyes. So I really don't believe in that, but I think it's very important in believing that this is possible. I think that's what keeps us doing the work that we are doing. This is this kind of temporalities and specialities of colonization ended or resulted in the division of the world to today. We talk about the global south, the global north. Everyone is super comfortable, or many people are comfortable in dividing and keep, these divisions and the borders between the north and the south, and there is the south in the north and the north and the south. And sometimes there are even, as you can see here, north in the south and south in the north. I'm thinking right now of Ceuta and Melilla. It's still a colony in Africa. So I think it's very difficult, and we have to maybe really relax a bit and try to be very precise and talk about contexts and talk about actions that we can do that can help us to think and change maybe few things. I don't think the museum or the academy, because academia is also a part of the processes that museums are also using. But what I will really try, I would love to talk to you about today is how human made climate change, and how the environment, the destruction of our environment, is also part of this colonial project. And here I'm specifically speaking about the atomic world and about all these powers that have been using oceans and deserts to test their nuclear powers, their nuclear weapons. This has been happening, since the 19. This is one of my earrings that's bothering you. I'm so sorry. This way or this way? Maybe this way. Okay, so sorry, it's noisy. No, it's very. Okay, let's solve one problem at least. So this countries, and you can read all the names here, have been using oceans and deserts to detonate their nuclear or test their nuclear weapons. And as we can see also in the next slide, that these are also the powers that are still oppressing and still commanding the world, not only in terms of knowledge, in terms of policies, but also the psychological space that we inhabit somehow. And some have declared the possession of nuclear weapons, but some did not declare it. And some have even the privilege to hide behind the notion of opacity. And here I'm thinking of the state of Israel. So what I will try to do with you here today, I will just focus on one of these powers, the French authorities, the French military and colonial authorities. I will try to share with you here what or how the French managed to use the Sahara Desert, the Algerian Sahara, during the Algerian Revolution and after the Algerian Revolution to test its nuclear powers. I will do so through three actions or three forms of publicness, as I call them, three forms of sharing with different kinds of audiences. One is a translation project. Second one is the performing. I think this is also doing the same. Huh? Oh, okay. No earrings today. Sorry. So the third form of publicness is the rehearsing. So one is really translation, the second is a exhibition, and the third one is a publication that I have been working on in the last few years together with many, many people. I mean, we are all part of collectives and of collaborations. We work, yes, with the institution and we criticize institutions, but we do need to find ways of sharing this knowledge, but also to make it circulate and make many audiences see this and be aware of this, because this is not only about the French in the Sahara, this is about all of us, and we will see why in a minute. So the translation project is, I'll say you very quickly so that we know what we are doing. So I will just go through the three forms, and then I will give you the context of what I'm talking about. And what when I say the French nuclear weapons program in the Sahara, what was it and how it unfolded. So this was really important for me, this translation project, because it's about testimonies of lived experiences, bodily experiences that many people collected, including the NGO in Lyon, the Observatoire des Armements, and other activists and filmmakers that collected, and myself as well, collected these witnesses, and they were mainly in Amazigh, in Arabic and in French, and we thought that we should, I mean, even though Arabic is also one of the most spoken language, but apparently some are not really interested in these histories, but we thought it would be very nice to try to translate these witnesses and make them public, accessible to other audiences all over the world. And this means that we created the website and they are still accessible, and I will tell you how we did it in a minute. The second form of publicness is the exhibition Performing Colonial Toxicity. And for me, the term performing here was very, very important, because I really wanted the visitors to feel radioactivity, not radioactivity because it's invisible, we cannot feel it, but colonial toxicity. So I tried to really define it and make the colonial toxicity perform in the bodies and in the psyches of the visitors that came, and I will share with you also in a minute what it meant and how I tried to think about it. The very third form of publicness was this publication called Colonial Toxicity, Rehearsing French Radioactive Architecture and Landscape in the Sahara. And this is sort of repository of archives, repository of documents that speaks about the colonial toxicity. So these are the three forms of publicness that I used for this project. But for the context, the French army and maybe before talking about 1960s, just for your information, maybe for those who are not really familiar, you saw the map at the very beginning. You saw the scale of the French British empires. You saw how both countries expanded, colonized territories and lands. But here we are, I'm just focusing on Algeria. So the French started colonizing Algeria in 1830 already. And the national liberation, or the Algerian revolution, or the Algerian War of Independence, started in 1954 and ended in 1962. So this means that here, during the Algerian Revolution, the French, while they were already exploiting oil and gas in the Sahara, so this started already in mid-50s, and the very first exploitation of oil and gas started in 1956. They were looking for we will see in a minute, empty space, and here I am absolutely against this platitude, this colonial platitude of emptiness, but they were looking for a space or a territory to detonate their very first nuclear weapons. And this detonation was top secret at that very time. So they depicted, or they indicated, or selected these two areas, again, an existing town, it still exists today, and in Nakir, where you will see in a minute, there is a mountain. So in the Regen center, for these experimentations, the French detonated 4 atomic bombs between 1960 and 1961. And in Nakir, they detonated 13 underground atomic bombs between 1961 and 1966. So here you see that the French managed to negotiate with the newly independent Algerian government to keep testing the bombs in the Sahara between 1961 and 1966. So after the independence of Algeria, and the let's say justification was that all the atomic bombs will be under the ground in a mountain, so there will be no radioactivity that will contaminate and pollute the region. But apparently, thanks to the witnesses that are available and thanks to many documents, apparently, and again, as you will see in a minute, the archives have classified, so I cannot say I am 100% sure, but apparently out of 13 bombs, 11 were not contained. So the promise was not maintained. So in Regen, there were these 4 atomic bombs. They were named after a rodent. It's an animal. It's called gerboise in French, gerbois in English. So they detonated gerboise bleu, blanc, rouge, and vert. So the flag, the French flag and the Algerian flag. Apparently, again, this is very, French. They used, for most of the 4 bombs, they used towers, except one, and I will share with you also the results of the radioactivity and the contamination of the soil and the land, and of course of the life of people living there. In Nakir, and specifically in Tenefella mountain, they detonated 13 atomic bombs. And here you can see the names of the atomic bombs. And you can see that they used gems, the names of the gems, the pierres précieuses, the stones, the gems, to name these 13 atomic bombs, as you can see here on this screen. You see the resolution of these documents are really, really bad. This is not that, I was not able to find the right document, etc. It's just that this is part of the story. We use these very low resolution documents to document the non-accessibility of the information as well. So you can see I'm very much interested in architecture, but it's really on the built, destroyed, and imagined environment. And here we do have the constructed environment that were used for these two centers, the Enneker Center and Regen Center. So I'm very much interested in their construction, and I'm also interested in their destruction, as you can see, as you will see in a minute. But to be very clear, all of these events, stories, histories, documents around the French nuclear weapons program in the Sahara were top secret during the event, so between 1960 and 1966. The idea was that the archives would open in 2020, and the archive have never been opened. They are still classified. And they are still secret. And I understand, that these imperial colonial powers don't want to share the recipe of the nuclear bomb. I mean, this is clear. Fine, don't do it. Sure, this is very dangerous for everyone. So that I get, but I really don't understand how come the Saharan people, but also the French veterans who were there, cannot know about the impact of this colonial toxicity. So in 2020, the archive was supposed to open, and they started working before 2020 on this, on collecting, on understanding, on starting really to prepare for the repository, for mainly the book, to be honest, the text, because that's what I was supposed to do. And unfortunately, they never opened these archives, and I really resisted, disobeyed, disrupted that kind of imposed amnesia, because I thought, it's not fair for not only the people who live there, but also the veterans, because we know that it's not secret. Their experience, and even if you go there to those sites, you see all the impact. I mean, you don't see radioactivity because it's unfortunately, that's also the danger of this colonial toxicity, but you can see that those landscapes there is something in those landscapes, and you can speak with the people who live there and with the people also who return to France, and they are both very, very sick. And we know that this sickness keeps, it can be, it is, not can be, it will be, it is transmitted to the children, and the children is really transgenerational. So what I did, I'm like, good, the message is clear, but it's really not so possible and thinkable to obey to that secrecy. So and here it's blocked, maybe. Hello? Yes? Okay. No? Yes? It flayed. Okay. Yeah, maybe, but just, okay, because I have to go back in order to make it play, but it does, okay, now, okay, let's do it. Yeah, so this was really an important event because the Algerian War of Independence was being waged at that very, very moment as well, between, as I said, 1954 and 1962. And while this war was being waged in the northern part of Algeria, and we know, through many works, many research, but also exhibitions and films like the Battle of Algiers, etc. This was a very violent conflict between the French and Algerians and also their allies. But at the very same moment when this was happening, the Sahara was, there was construction sites in the Sahara, really huge constructions that were being realized there. And the excuse or the justification of choosing this very site was because it was vacant, it was empty. And as we did with this publication, Deserts Are Not Empty, and with the introduction against the regime of emptiness, this space is inhabited. This space is not only inhabited by humans, but also by non-human forces. And it has a very, very important equilibrium that one should and must not touch it. But unfortunately, as you saw at the beginning, deserts and oceans are being polluted and destroyed. And we have also to expose that. And we have to make sure that it stops. It will stop. It stops, hopefully. But as I said before, I have my doubts. So what I started doing was to collect as many information as possible from the 1960s to today. And as historians, normally you really decide. I'm going to only work between 1961 to 1966 and only speak and work and dig into these histories. But for this very project, it was not possible. One, because the archives were classified, are still classified, so top secret. Second, because it's really about the temporality, about the future. Radioactivity is irreversible, it's also forever. That's also part of the coloniality I was talking about at the beginning. So it did not stop in 1966 when the French left and kept doing the nuclear testing in the Pacific Ocean between 1966 and 1996. So here, what I really tried to do was to collect videos, films, leaked reports, any kind of report, military reports, medical reports, environmental reports, photographs from any, even online, from online sources. Spoke a lot with people, and I always tried to read what the French were saying, and the French authority was saying that in 1966 we cleaned the area and we did what we had to do. And here, as you can see in this very photograph from 2007, the site, this center, still exists today. Yeah? So I was interested, as I mentioned, in the built environment, but I was also interested in the underground. They built many laboratories under the ground, and not only because it was secret, but also to protect the employees from the heat and the winds of the Sahara. So these two tunnels, as you can see, they had to be walled off, but they are still accessible. And here is a team that was led by a filmmaker, Abi Ben Shiha, who were able to go there and film these catacombs, I would say, of radioactivity. Another very important aspect of this colonial toxicity was the soil, the land. Here, this is a bomb that was detonated on the ground, and as you can see here, the effect of the contamination of this ground. We also included this kind of screen recording of the site that's highly radioactive. They tried to clean it, as you can see, but unfortunately, people can really easily die if you approach this radioactive site. We also collected, we showed you the built environment. We also collected the ruins, the destroyed environment, this kind of, not sure how to call them, in architecture, we can call them, maybe ruins, parts of buildings, cadavers of buildings. We can call them many things, but they are also wastes as well, and they are still today in the Sahara. What's really important, as well as I was mentioning with the newspaper articles, I started also collecting newspaper articles from the 1960s, but also from today. The Sahara, and every year, I know in Spain as well, because from social media, I was able to save many photographs that were taken also in this part of the world, in Spain. There are every year around March, April, the winds of the Sahara are extremely powerful, and they bring to you beautiful colors. You have fantastic landscapes. You can take photographs and post them on social media. Unfortunately, that dust and that sand is also carrying radioactivity. Scientists say it's not enough to they said many things, scientists, so it's not really enough. You have to inhale, you have to be exposed to more quantities to be sick. I really don't know. Really, this we have to double, triple, quadruple check. But so this boomerang effect, I think it's also very important. And I also collected all this information. So just for the context, that's what we are talking about. When I got this invitation by If I Can Dance, I Don't Want to Be Part of Your Revolution, which is a foundation based in Amsterdam, I said they have a biennial called, every 2 years there is a biennial, but 1 year ago, 2 years ago, there was a biennial called Bodies and Technologies. And they invite always 3 researchers and 3 artists, and I was part of the 3 researchers. And I said, for me, it's very clear, it's about colonial toxicity. We have to find forms. The form is an exhibition, yes, but this is also about performativity. So I said, I have to find ways to make the colonial toxicity perform. This is not me, eh? Okay. So and the other aspect I also was really convinced about was the publication. So we had this tool, and they said, look, we would really need to raise funding, much more funding, because the publication is going to be super experimental, and I know it's not going to be about 20 pages. And this is a work that I want to share with the world, because I have been doing it, and it's, if with the exhibition it will disappear, but with the publication it will remain. People will keep using it. And also we had this translation project that came while I was working with witnesses, and I very quickly in Amsterdam understood that this is, if you have them in French or in Arabic and Amazigh, nobody will read them. So we had to translate them, and this is what we did. So we started first, and this was really important for me, to start with the preparation of the audience, which means that if you read, and they are public, if you read the witnesses of the people who went through this catastrophe, this nuclear hell, somehow it's really not about images. It's not about somebody who is translating to you. This is really about what they went through. And some of them were also very angry. Some of them were also French, saying that, we were there on site. We didn't know, and this is what happened to us. And now our kids are also sick. So what we did was to invite colleagues. Again, I said this is a really huge collective project. You can see all the names of the fantastic colleagues that I really thank. We asked them that if they have time, they had between May and September, they could submit we offered them to give them 2 translations, 2 witnesses in one of the languages that they speak, and they translate them into English. And we really wanted to do this with them and not to hire, an official translator, etc., for a number of reasons. One is about they work also on similar topics, and they can do this or work or use it also for their own work and for their with their students as well. Some of them are also teaching, some of them are activists, but we also wanted to keep the authenticity of the translation of the text. Some of the people who were interviewed do not really, are not academics. So it means that their text, it's really about what they went through. So we really wanted to keep this, and we created this website. We had, again, really long time, and it was not about, the pressure. We documented also the process, and we shared the process with the public, so everything is online. We kept the original, and we offered also the translation. So you can see we asked each if they are still alive, if each witness, if she, he, they, and to be very honest, they were mainly he, if he wanted to be public or not, but we anonymized most of their identities because of their family, etc. So this is really very important moment, because people became aware of the gravity and of the intensity of this colonial toxicity. And here you can see the website. It's still, let's say, again, it's accessible to anyone who has access to internet and who can speak either French, Amazigh, Arabic, or English. That was really the first iteration. While this fantastic 20 colleagues and friends and activists were working on the translation, we published them. I was working on the publication and on the exhibition, and the exhibition came before the publication. So we had, if I can dance, as I mentioned, as a commission, like the commissioner. We also applied for funding. Pro Helvetia also participated in funding the publication and the exhibition. And thanks to, if I can dance, they reached out to Frame Framed in Amsterdam, and we had this exhibition called Performing Colonial Toxicity. And Frame Framed is a huge it's a former depot of trams, so it's really an immense, quite large space. So I wanted to design this exhibition, and I have one privilege. I studied architecture as well as undergrad, so really working with space, designing exhibition for me was also, or is very, very important. So I said I would love to really use your space and try to create stations, try to create moments. I'm trying very hard. Maybe can you next? I don't know why. Yes. Okay. Here. Oops. Too much. Yeah. So what I tried to do here was to work with the space of these frame framed, and to try to use not everything, but most of the documents that I collected over the years, and try to assemble them together. So I created different topics like justice, atmospheric bombs, and used A4 papers and assembled those information together. We used also I'm so sorry because it's okay. And we use these stations, I mean, this wall, this very fragile A4 paper assembled together with these rings, also to project videos and documentaries of the sites, so that you can see today how these sites look like. And we also interviewed a number of colleagues, not only we have the witnesses, the written witnesses, the translated witnesses of the victims, but we also have interviews with researchers, so academics like Jill Jarvis or Gabriel Hecht, but we also have discussions and conversations with artists and filmmakers who went there to film the sites, and also scientists to understand really what radioactivity is and means, and so that the people who were or come to this exhibition can understand the intensity of this exhibition. So as you can see here, we really tried to make this secrecy, what was secret in the 1960s and still secret today, accessible to many publics, people who can come to this exhibition and see the colonial toxicity performing on their body. That was really the aim of this exhibition, and it was also designed in a way that it can be sent to any institution around the world who can pay for it to arrive to that institution. So we can fold it. It's an A4 paper with these rings. We assembled all the rings together. So it's very easy to install, and it's traveling. It's traveled to Zurich, the Goethe exhibitions, to the Mosaic Rooms in London, to Brown University, and it will continue. It will travel. I mean, the idea is it has to travel as in many places as possible, so that we become all aware of these histories. Because if we talk about Hiroshima, we all know, and if you say Jerboa or Tenafilla, we don't know. And this is, I think, also part of this disruption and the role of exhibition makers. What was also very important was to try to catch the attention of the visitors. For example, in this very case, we have a station called Jerboa site, and this station the term is not familiar, I'm sure, but I tried to create a term that would express the or name what we are seeing here. This is a highly radioactive matter that was created, as you saw before with the Google Earth video. It was a highly radioactive matter that's still there, and but we don't because we don't name it, we don't refer to it. And I was inspired by Trinity bomb and the Trinitite that the US also created. I mean, there are many nuclear sites around the world, and that bomb, you know, if you say Trinitite, you know that you are talking about a fused sand that's radioactive and not here. So I also tried to name this station, and for each station there is a caption and also some text to be read so that people understand what they are looking at. So that was really, really important. And in terms of design, I tried to work with the human body and the scale. So in the top, you can really see these huge photographs. Some of them have very, let's say, good resolution, and some of them not really. And we also worked with stills that we took from existing videos and films. So, sorry, I'm trying really to, yes, no, no. Maybe next, please. Yes, so what was really important as well was the reproduction of the witnesses. So when you approach the stations, you have to read. You have to, I mean, you have to, I force them, or you, visitors, to read, because that's what you see. And this is really at the same height of the human eye. So in a way, the visitors are really, excuse me? Immersed, thank you. Exactly. They're absolutely immersed by all this information. I was really looking for that word. And of the abundance of the information, of data, of knowledge, of films, of videos, of witnesses, of all kinds of documents that will testify to the events that happened and continue to happen and continue to toxify the deserts and the life of people there. So that was really a part also of the performativity. There was also audio as well that we cannot hear today. I was really afraid of technology. I'm happy we don't have audio, but there was also some audio elements as well, so that you can even feel and hear the Geiger of the radioactivity speaking to us. So that's the second iteration, and the very third iteration, that's how I end also this presentation, if it goes forward. While doing, you know, all this work, I was very, he said where the point is. Oh, okay. No, it's the, yes, okay, I mentioned that they were, I see. They were, now it's too much, huh? Now I'm confused. Okay. Yes, I mentioned, you know, it travel to other places, and each time we adapt the exhibition to the space. So we can cut parts of the upper parts or the lower parts, and we adapt it to the space. And that was really part of the design of the exhibition. So the last iteration of the project, of this form of publicness, is the publication. It's a sort of repository documents that, again, because I did, you know, all the work, I thought it would be very, very important to really share it with the public. We share it with other people who are interested in continuing doing this work, because as we mentioned before, these documents are not, or the institutional archives are not available. So while collecting and understanding these documents, while also I organized the exhibition with all these stations and all these themes and topics. For the book, I thought it's really important to focus on the two sites, you know, to make sure that when you open it, you know that we have two sites, again, and Inike, and for each site, we have kind of sub chapters, and these chapters are very much in relation to space. And so we have the site, we have exposed bodies, construction site, etc. And the notion of the above and under the ground was also really, really important. Here, again, it's a collective project. So many people worked on. Oh, sorry, you can take a picture. You wanted to take a picture. No, the guy. Yeah, okay. So we were very important, conversation with the graphic designer. His name is François Gérard Meunier. We had, and there was like other people also involved in this. He came with this fantastic idea to create to use colors to create spaces so that the documents that we use for each sub chapter can be read by readers, because the problem was that there are so many provenances, so many sources. Some are very low resolution, some are very, very high resolution, and we wanted to create a sort of space where people can read them in a way that they can recognize where they are, because it's a nearly 600 page book. So what we did, we were inspired by, unfortunately, also highly radio active. These are lava coming out of one of the mountains, and this is also a metamorphosis of a stone. And the colors, I mean, right now it's not maybe very, very clear, but we took the colors, or we tried to use the colors and to come up with like a range of colors that one for Regen and one for Inniker, so that we could create these spaces where people can read and be somehow immersed again exactly in these documents. And so here we have the Regen with the subtitles or sub-chapters, and Inniker with also its own sub-chapters. And the idea was to really make sure that the readers will be confronted first with images, with evidence, without any caption, without any text. So the first thing when you open the chapter is that you encounter and you are cut by all these illustration, all these evidence that you can see. Sometimes you guess what it is, sometimes you don't. And after each of this a pile of evidence of images, we had the captions, and in the captions, really important because we mentioned all the sources as well. It means that whoever is interested in keeping doing this work and researching further, they can go and find these originals, and they can also mention them. So we can really use this as a repository of evidence, and that was for us extremely important. And here I have 1 more minute, and I am in the 40 one. Yeah. So in this 1 more minute, what's really important for me, not only for the translation, the exhibition, and this is Aisha that we will listen to in a minute. That we will. The most important thing was not to think this as an isolated episode, not isolated from, saying, oh no, this is, the French and Algeria, this is an issue between these two countries. No, this is really about all of us. This is really about, as we mentioned before, this sand, this dust is traveling all over the world. This is a responsibility that we all have, and this is why this exhibition has to travel, and we do need to remember Tenefella. We do need to remember, and it's very close to Spain, so maybe so yeah. So it's very important, to resist this isolation and to always say this is not our problem. This is our problem. This is the problem of every one of us. It's the problem, yes, of the Algerian government. Yes, it's the problem of the French government. It's the problem of the international government, international community. But as you know, the international community has failed to prevent violence. So it's really our problem, all of us, and it's circulating, as you can see here. But to really end this colonial toxicity, I would like to read to you an important witness by Aisha, who was 10 years old when she was in Mertutek. Mertutek is a village in the Sahara, and because of one of these accidents, beryl accident, between brackets, radioactivity, or there was a radioactive cloud that crossed their village, and most of her relatives died, and she was with her aunt, with the animals outside of the village. So when she came back, she discovered the death of her relatives. And I would like really to end with her telling us what she remembers. So it's, yes, about history. It's also about memory. Yes, it's about archive, but it's also about really the bodily experience of people who live in these territories. So this is how I will read, and I will have to leave you with her text and read for you. It's Aisha speaking. The witness was recorded by Bruno Hadjih, and it is accessible to all of you in a movie called Atom by Elisabeth Levray. And she speaks in Amazigh. Here we have the translation in English. What do you want? What story do you want me to tell? I don't know of any other story than this one. I don't know any others. I only know that when it was detonated, it is like it was yesterday. When this thing happened, this, what do you think? What is this thing? It's a star? No. It's not a star. A trembling? No. That thing is terrible. And all of a sudden, trails of smoke were going one way and the other. This. We asked ourselves, what is this thing? This. We thought the mountains were falling. We had seen the helicopters flying in all directions. It was noisy. And all of a sudden, we saw a white shape. They came out of the smoke like a ball. This. We were all shaking. We were scared. We ran off. We hid in the trees. I said to my aunt, say your prayer, that's death coming. I said to her, I think it's death that has already happened. We went down the river. When we arrived, people were dead. That's what happened. I was probably 10 years old. I was a little girl. I was a shepherdess. I was a shepherdess when Taurit exploded and everything that happened. I remember. I kept my goats, and that's it. Much later, we were told it was the bomb. It's true. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these both presentations. I think that perhaps we can open to have any questions or comments that can work now, which is difficult after this, but I know.
I'll do it in English so they understand. Just first of all, thank you so much for your presentations. They were really beautiful, and it was like a privilege to witness them. And I would like to ask Samia, well, actually both of you, about the reception of this work, of both of your works. I know the Frame or Frame project, and I would be very interested to understand how it's received in times of genocide, in different contexts where these connections are quite clearly made in your work. And yeah, I think it's quite important to understand how this context that we're living in reframes the things that are being exposed, the way that things touch one another when you exhibit or make things public, especially this kind of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Reception. Both, right? Yeah. I think it's really important to speak about the reception. If you want, I can start and you can. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So the exhibition was inaugurated on October 7, 2023. Yeah? It was the days after we were really. I mean, it was really, really difficult. I think the team of Frame a Friend is, and also If I Can Dance, are very efficient, effective, and generous. So we had many conversations, and we did use the space as a space, really the space of the exhibition. You know, one of the stations was we could remove it so that we could create larger space. So we used the space of colonial toxicity to talk about colonial toxicity. So there were many public events, discussions, readings, grievings as well. So yeah, it's they really, I mean, everyone, I mean, it was not based in Amsterdam, but really the team did really a great work in making this space as a space for conversations and for sometimes conflict. That's also part of, you know, what we also have to do. So the exhibition traveled afterwards. I give a lot of tours wherever I am. I use it as a tool of conversation as well. So, you know, we talk about not only this exhibition, but how this space, how this exhibition remind us of many other events around the world. At the Mosaic Rooms, also the team of the Mosaic Rooms, extraordinary. So we organized also lots of conversations and tours, but also panels around these themes. Yeah, so it really depends on the team. To be very honest, on the people who host the exhibition. Now at Brown University, it was part of the media elements conference. So we also talked a lot about what's happening around the world, absolutely, and the genocide and the legacies of colonial rule, absolutely. Sorry.
Thank you for the question. So in real time, if I'm in the space and I'm sort of there for the public to witness, as we walk around the work, oftentimes people feel overwhelmed. You know, they necessarily don't know exactly what they're looking at. And when I'm present and can share my questions or concerns, it's like a light switch comes on, and I can feel both anger and possibilities in audiences in real time. And when I start talking about the sort of spectacle of violence, spectacle of genocide up against a sort of slow violence and environmental violence, an embodied violence that happens over time, and this idea of the ongoing colonial slave capital, hyper-capital project as some place where we have to create spaces of autonomy, you know, even in enclosures. So those are the kinds of conversations that happen often one-on-one. When a curator or someone calls me and says, or interviews someone and asks me a question around, either the haptic nature of the work, that I invite people in to touch and see, and I get to the conversation around sensoria and the haptic, why things are disappearing and being blown up and being always fractured. So that is a conversation about what do we do with remnants? What do we do with the fragments? And I say, well, I don't think that deconstruction or the dismantling of the physicality of colonial project, things are fragments. I think these things are whole. Like when you break something that is intent on your demise, I don't think that what is broken apart are fragments. I think the pieces become wholes, right? So I think that it depends on the conversation, where I am. If I'm in, if I'm available, I'm there to talk about it. Oftentimes when people are witnessing the paintings and talking about water and ideas of extraction, those are really clearly an argument for you cannot extract unless you abstract. There is no extraction without abstraction. And as an artist, that's my fidelity, to get inside that conversation, right? And to really invent towards new forms that really deal with art as an embodied experiences of sensorias that are trans-historical. So in the work, it is the work I make work, and I intend it to be beyond me. I'm not into comprehension, that way, right? So we often have conversations about comprehension and who's this work for. And I said, well, when I'm an ancestor and people are born beyond me, then they will figure something out that I could not possibly have figured out as a maker. So I'm both working to, exhaust the possibilities of my own ancestorship and the ancestorship that I inherit. So it gets into that poetic realm as well. So it depends on how it is received. It's really super subjective.
Great. Thank you both for fantastic presentations. They were really thought-provoking. And we've been talking a lot about collecting, about archives and repositories, because there's so much related to the museum and its kind of colonial imperial, right, expandedness across time and the globe. But what's interesting about both the work you do is that in your work, the body has become a kind of repository. It holds histories, it holds memory. And I'm wondering in what way, if the body is an archive in your respective projects, how are you thinking about moving forward with that, and how is that useful in new projects or new things that you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I've changed recently, or I'm pivoting towards recently in my practice, is the language again, this idea of performance. And I'm requiring from myself, when I make things, to be inhabited or to be embodied or experienced in real time. I want to make more than, I want to produce an acrobatic. I want to be able to have a sort of projection of thought and projection of thought onto an object where you can see yourself, moving around it, flying around it, sitting on it. So there's a certain level of in the sculptural work specifically, there's a certain ask that I require of the installations where the curiosity feeds the looking and the slow looking happens and then the fast movement happens. So these sort of, I call them choreographies of indeterminacy, right? So I'm trying to push forward with that, where there's more conversations around radical engineering, where, you know, the balance and weight and scale of the thing really, of the object really, I think, provokes a kind of condition, where you're thinking about dams and you're thinking about levees and you're thinking about infrastructure in a way that you feel the vulnerability in your body, right? So this transference of, I say to people, when I start talking about this as architecture and infrastructure of improvisation and indeterminacy, that means that there's so much in the establishment of city spaces, urban spaces, where the engineering piece is completely unknown and invisible. So what does it mean to bring up those sort of engineering feats to the surface of a sculpture and then ask people to understand and feel the cantilever, feel the density, and experience line, but when line becomes, I'll say, when line becomes volume and volume becomes plane, right? And thinking about that as a movement towards something that's always classified as performance, but something that's more about the acrobatics needed to defeat a sort of colonial logic. And at the same time, establish a semi-autonomy so you can have freedom, as Ronaldo was talking about, where people do not overdetermine your comportments, and you're free from that and you're liberated from that. And there's no history that I can go to that's more, I think, effective than history in my own body from the history of self-liberators from the transatlantic slave trade. You know, from silence to wailing, every register in between has to, for me, transfer into the work. And it is, then I've arrived at a discursive form.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So for me, it's really an invitation to listen to what victims went through. When I started this project, I was not really sure how to include them. I did interview or discussed with people. Sometimes I was allowed to record, sometimes I was not allowed to record, but those conversations made me really aware of the importance of listening, that we, meaning as, let me use the term, consumers of knowledge or of exhibitions, see those exhibitions. So the way that your body is impacted if you read a book or you visit an exhibition is absolutely different from when you speak with someone who is telling about what he, they went through. So that experience, that transmission of the experience, that I would say also suffering and rage. Lots of people are extremely upset because they didn't know, they were not told. Not only the Saharan population, also the French veterans. So they're extremely upset. And if you speak with them or read what they wrote, you will not forget. And for me, that was really important for us to go through this and to try to remember. I mean, you can forget images because we see 1 million images per day, but I hope that we won't forget what people went through and say that how they went through what they went through. So that was for me really important to include. I didn't know how to include it. And I remember many people said, yeah, but you know, people don't read these witnesses. And I remember the Observatoire des Armements, which is a French NGO based in Lyon. They have 2 folders of witnesses. And they said, look, you know, people come here and they look for reports. and nobody has the time to go through them. I was so offended and so, how do you say, like, felt so embarrassed even. I'm like, you don't have time to go through 700 pages and you do your work? You have to have time. This is all your life. I mean, you cannot do it in 10 days or 2 months. These are years of work, and we have to go through 700 pages and read them. This is what I did. I selected 40 witnesses because they were really covering unique experiences and also extremely impactful. How this will impact the work I do in the future, I really don't know. Each time, it really depends on the subject and on the work I do. Each time things change. In a way, the difficulties that I encounter dictate the forms that repositories, books, exhibitions, or websites take. But I think what I really somehow appreciated or learned from is the feedback of we call them participant translators, of the 20 people who helped us go through that. I mean, they were transformed by the reading of 2 witnesses. And I also know that many students and researchers and NGOs around the world, that they are using them. And there are only 40. If we have more resources, and if we have very rich people who don't know what to do with the money, we can invest in translating more, because there are many more witnesses. So the impact of the text, of the memory of the victims, is very powerful. Yeah.
Bueno. Okay. Sí, sí. Hala.
Sí. Oh, pardon. Sí. Sorry.
Sí. No me quería dar la oportunidad de intentar hacer una pregunta, y aprovecho también de agradecer a las personas que están traduciendo. Lo han hecho increíble. Muchas gracias a los amigos que están haciendo ese trabajo. Hay una pregunta por el espacio, hay una pregunta por la construcción de geografías, hay un intento por pensar otros modos de habitar. Ya sabemos, nos dijo la hermana, serán nuestras hijas, nuestras nietas las que probablemente tendrán que seguir reflexionando, pero dejémosles sospechas. ¿Cuál es ese espacio que tenemos que construir? ¿Cuáles son esas infraestructuras que tenemos que generar? ¿Cuáles son esos habitares que tenemos que producir? Eso.
I think that because I'm a producer, I make exhibitions, and I try to make exhibitions when visitors come inside of that exhibition, that they feel some kind of tenderness and care, and that there's an awareness that not only are they in an institution, a building, a museum, but then they've stepped into my space where both the paintings, the drawings, and the sculptures have the ethos of liberation, right? So the energy, the work, the scent, the taste of the exhibition has to be at the register of freedom. And so I don't, the reason I talked about needing an infrastructure for my practice and having established Black comp and hypershapes is because I have a propensity for moving towards and understanding encounters, like moments of tension and moments of encounters. So when I recognize that, I can then comprehend world building, world unbuilding, and world rebuilding. So habitats not only need to support revolutionary politics, but they also, for me, need to sort of undo or unpack what we know physiologically about the world that we live in, right? So if I am built of water and I oftentimes, I talk about, I say I'm painting a painting of a painting. And what I mean by that is when I'm in the zone of making a painting about Blackness, I super go to an atomic level. Right? I super go to the things that I cannot name about my body because my body is made of so many. And I need to trust that when I'm in the studio, in the gallery, in the museum, all of it is the same. All of it is a lab. All of it is an experiment. And what the museums allow is a condition of scale, right? So it's about a kind of embodied experience in an infrastructure of creativity that gets you to click in understanding why dams, why the levees broke. You understand me? So when I figured out the terror of underdeveloped infrastructure from a city in Chicago, because I'm from Chicago, the city where I understand viaducts, trains, I understand the sprawling downtown of high rises, and then my people come from New Orleans that survived Katrina. Those folks came from Alabama, and the trans-historical condition of surviving the genocide of Native Americans, the continued recolonization of the South, all of that is one. It's ongoing. There are peaks and valleys. There are different geographies, but I have to understand how sprawling it is, right? And I have to understand through making the multi-scalar condition in which oppression comes in. So when you're coming into the habitat of my installations or in the paintings or in the clearings that I try to make with my work, my condition is to propel you to understanding how these networks inform and how your physiological condition can resist those and refuse those things by recognizing the so-called invisible, by understanding the distance from your house to extraction points, by understanding the onslaught or the impending the growing extraction conditions of all kinds, right? So the paintings are very aware of foreground, background, middle ground, right? So the sculptures, in my mind, all of it is the same. But as an artist, my push is to undo those logics that lock you in to both over-determining what your body can do and over-determining what your body is owed to the capital condition. All of that needs to be frayed in relationship to the habitats that I'm trying to create in museum spaces. So things do fall apart. They're supposed to, right? An art is supposed to try to think about how do you expand when you try to tear things apart? How do you expand with that tearing, that breaking up, to acknowledge the whole of yourself in the middle of those things?
Yeah. Did you use the term in Spanish, espacio? Space. No, I'm just because for me, space, in architecture. Just asking. So, but we can interpret space in many ways. So very often, but didn't know if it's like a site, a space, or But maybe if you accept, maybe we can go to this term habitat, and you also used it right now. I think because for me, space means so many things, but we can maybe later discuss it because I'm afraid I will give like a very long response. But if we focus on habitat, at least I know what it is, because space can be many things. And it's also about not only the physical, the psychological. I mean, for me, these are very two important modes of existing. Yeah? We have the physical, the psychological, etc. But if we focus on habitat, I think it's really so important for me to ask the question, who is enabling, creating the habitat, and for whom? So what these exhibitions and this work is doing is addressing the imperial colonial institution. There are many associations in Algeria and France who are really fighting for their rights, and they are from day one, to be very honest. So they are active in safeguarding and trying to protect their habitat. And I think what this work is doing is to confront the institution with the habitat that they created for others without even asking them and informing them. They were not aware. And that habitat is irreversible, is toxic, contaminated, polluted. And who has to repair it? Who has to clean it? Who has to, we know who, but the question is when and how this kind of work and many other works, this is not the only one, and we don't exist in a vacuum, of course, no, it's really like a continuation of the work, as you said, people before us and people after us, etc. But the question is like, how do you put pressure on those who have to make these people have an habitat of dignity? It's like the basic conditions that a community can tolerate. This is, for me, really important, and that's what institutions, including museums and universities and other institutions, have to really guarantee. It's, as many people say, enough is enough. Yeah, but we have to practice it. This is, it's not like a work that museums are interested in because you cannot buy it. It's not creating any value. It's telling stories and histories of people who did not choose to be in that reality, but they are in it. So that's the habitat that these institutions have to repair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are no estamos cerrando totalmente. Faltan 2 minutitos para luego poder bajar a compartir algo con el grupo Come Plantas, que va a ser bastante amazing. Pero para ir cerrando solamente, if you want to, yes, to come down, yeah. If you want, yes, or you stay there and and you, yes. We are going to close the yes. Para cerrar, nuestra colega Ana Garrido, del CAP de Coordinación Museística del Departamento de Cultura de la Generalitat, va a hacer unas pequeñas palabras y luego haremos una pequeña última cosa y nos iremos abajo. Gràcies, Anna,
Gràcies. Gràcies a vosaltres. Bona tarda a tothom. Avui tanquem la Trobada Internacional del projecte Museu Habitat. 3 dies de reflexions i debats que ens han permès escoltar veus i experiències d'abast nacional i internacional al voltant de temes que ens preocupen a totes i a tots, professionals, col·lectius, a tots sectors vinculats al món dels museus. I una de les coses que volem destacar d'aquesta trobada és que precisament ha reunit persones d'àmbits ben diversos, però que comparteixen una mateixa meta, fer els museus i els equipaments culturals més socials. Cadascun de vosaltres ens heu aportat les vostres vivències, el vostre coneixement, saviesa, sensibilitat, les vostres necessitats, que de fet haurien de ser presents de forma natural i habitual en tots els projectes que encapçalem des d'aquests espais. incorporant doncs, la diversitat social en la presa de decisions, com te n'ha sortit. A vegades podia semblar que eren dos bàndols oposats, els de fora, els dels marges i els de dintre, les institucions. Però, de fet, des dels Museus de Catalunya ja fa anys que hem passat a l'acció treballant per avançar en aquesta dimensió social dels nostres equipaments i superar barreres per acostar la cultura i el patrimoni a la ciutadania d'una manera eficaç i total, introduint noves lectures a les col·leccions, atenent a la diversitat, acostant les comunitats en les accions del museu, que se'ls facin seus, fent més accessibles i inclusius els discursos, entre moltes altres coses. De fet, aquests dies heu pogut veure alguns exemples, però us demano que, si podeu, trepitgeu el territori perquè veureu casos de bones pràctiques en els museus que tenen les seves portes obertes i que treballen amb les seves comunitats des de fa molts anys. Amb dificultats, amb moltes dificultats, amb major o menor encert, però en la immensa majoria dels casos amb el mateix objectiu que vosaltres, ser útils a la comunitat a la que donen servei. Des del Servei de Museus i Protecció de Béns Mobles, juntament amb agents i museus d'arreu del país, fa anys que vam començar a treballar amb el que avui és el nostre full de ruta, que han de ser els museus en l'horitzó 2030, i és el Pla de Museus de Catalunya. És un document que obria la porta a debatre molts dels temes que han anat sorgint al llarg d'aquestes jornades, que a més són els reptes com a societat que tenim: participació de la comunitat, renovació de relats, noves institucionalitats, noves formes de governança. Per naturalesa, els museus som agents socials, transformadors, fortament compromesos amb la societat actual. Per aquest motiu, estem impulsant diferents programes per garantir l'accessibilitat universal en els equipaments, oferir noves mirades a les col·leccions, visibilitzar col·lectius poc representats, plantejar el debat ètic de les restitucions i molts altres. Però, com aquests dies s'ha visibilitzat, cal treballar encara molt més per convertir-nos en institucions amb estructures permeables, flexibles, que facilitin aquestes iniciatives i, sobretot, la feina de les persones que les impulsen, tant de dins com de fora. És per aquest motiu que celebrem haver tingut aquest espai que ens ha brindat el Museu Habitat. Agraïm a tots els participants l'oportunitat d'escoltar-vos. N'hem après molt i n'hem pres nota. Ens quedem, per exemple, amb algunes de les idees que han sorgit, com la necessitat d'equiparar el sistema cultural a l'educatiu o al sanitari. Tenir una llei de drets culturals que garanteixi una governança compartida o donar més autoritat als responsables culturals. També el tema de les absències. Continuarem treballant amb més força i més escolta perquè ningú se senti exclòs en les nostres activitats, en els nostres discursos, en les nostres propostes. Ens agradarà comptar en aquest camí de llarg recorregut amb vosaltres per fer el camí plegats. Agraïm a totes les persones que tant a la sala com també des del canal de Patrimoni ens heu seguit. Totes compartim la passió i la ferma voluntat de treballar per canviar les nostres institucions i fer-les inclusives. És un camí difícil, però l'administració també la fem les persones i les lleis les podem canviar, i en això estem. Estem treballant amb una nova llei de drets culturals, una nova llei de patrimoni cultural i també una nova llei de museus. He començat dient que avui tancàvem la trobada del Museu Habitat, però en realitat avui l'obrim, ja que crec fermament que comencem una nova etapa per continuar col·laborant i treballant plegats per aconseguir que totes les idees i visions que hem compartit aquí aquests dies esdevinguin la norma habitual en el món cultural i puguem conformar així el Museu Habitat. De moment hem iniciat un procés de treball, un camí prometedor que us animo a continuar. Dono pas a l'equip de Museu Habitat perquè facin aquesta recol·lecta d'idees. Moltes gràcies.
Muchas gracias, Ana. Muchas gracias. Y ahora sí, para cerrar, el encuentro se llama Trastocando Hechizos y no hay hechizos sin algunas palabras mágicas. Entonces, lo que les vamos a pedir es algunas palabras mágicas. Que cada una, como cuando quiera y como quiera, si tiene alguna palabra que quiera decir después de estos 3 días de estar aquí, de estar escuchando y conversando, quizás pueda nombrarla ahora. ¿Tiene más?
Tengo 2.
2 palabras mágicas.
¿Puede ser?
Pueden ser 3. Puede ser el conjuro entero, si quieres.
Vale. Honestidad. Responsabilidad.
Ujú. No. No. Voy a volver igual.
Lucha.
Eco.
Viajar, quedarse.
Teranga.
Discontinuidades.
Evolución.
Deseducación.
One word. I know you have it.
Spinning. Possibility.
Possibility. Ujú. Ujú. Los técnicos no. Eric, una palabra.
Esperanza.
Otro mundo es posible si generamos entre todos las condiciones.
Del tratamiento al trato.
Invent.
Tensión creativa.
Gratitud.
Sabemos hacer lo que no sabemos hacer.
Evitar la crisis.
El conjuro es cortito.
Cortito. Dos cosas. La posibilidad de transformar es proporcional a la voluntad de arriesgar.
Persistence, insistence, respect.
Differences is richness.
Yo te meto un rollo.
El conjuro siempre es corto, amigo.
Todo lo que diga es apropiacionismo. Es que esto no, sin contexto no es.
Éxodo.
Quien la sigue, la consigue.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and wonderful. Thanks for everything. Y ahora con esta conjuro nos vamos al jardín a comer plantas y escuchar música.
No. Sí. Sí, jo crec que sí. Jo crec que ara sí, ara ja podeu recollir baix les taulades i us ho deixarem tot a baix. On està muntat, però tot a baix.
Muchas gracias. Y Chia, te dejo esto, mira.
Sí, gracias.
A ver, más enganchado.
Sí, muy bien, Eric, muy bien.